We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for the wall.
Construction projects regularly cause controversy, but the ones we're looking at could potentially trigger wars, have resulted in people being put in prison, and are allegedly responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. These are the world's most controversial megaprojects. Number 4. Trump's Wall to Mexico. Our first project involves someone who is no stranger to controversy and is arguably the most divisive figure of the 21st century. We're going to build a wall across the Mexican border, and Mexico is going to pay for it, was the bold gambit proposed by 2016 presidential candidate Donald Trump. He was a deal maker, trying to strike the most outrageous deal you could imagine. Building a wall around an entire country seemed crazy, but Trump simply compared it to the Great Wall of China. The wall across China is 21,000 kilometers, whereas the Mexico wall only needed to be roughly 1,600 kilometers because of natural barriers. The full length is around 3,200 kilometers. But how did all this controversy even start? Donald Trump had gained a lot of critical popularity by accusing Barack Obama of not being born in America.
It's not a birth certificate, Candy, and people are trying to figure out why isn't he giving his birth certificate. It's not a birth certificate. A certificate of live birth, and you can see that one that you have and the one that I brought you, because that's the one that's on the internet and all over the place. It doesn't even have a serial number. It doesn't have a signature.
He had asked for a temporary ban of all Muslims from the USA. And the wall to Mexico was like adding fuel to the fire.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
For many people, Trump's election campaign was purely based on racism, and the wall to Mexico became yet another symbol of his attitude towards immigrants.
They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
At the same time, the demand for a wall also resonated with many Americans. From 1965 to 2015, more than 16 million Mexicans migrated to the USA, which is considered one of the largest mass migrations in modern history. People from poorer countries in Latin America also passed through this border. The initial price tag was $4 to $5 billion. As of January 2021, the federal government spent $15 billion on the wall's construction. While Trump compared his wall to the Great Wall of China, they differed greatly in their complexity. The wall to Mexico consists of a series of 18 to 30-foot tall steel posts driven into concrete and covered with cage wire. The concrete prevents intruders from digging under the posts, while an additional 5-foot panel at the top prevents people from climbing over it. Under Trump's presidency, the government built 727 kilometers of the border wall, but around 640 kilometers were reconstructions of existing barriers. A major part that was constructed stretches across the border along California, New Mexico, and Arizona. Incomplete areas are mainly in Texas, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley. Under Trump's presidency, the number of illegal immigrants went from 11.3 million in 2016 to 10.9 million in 2020, according to the Cato Institute. The BBC also reported that having remained at nearly the same level for years, the number of people living in the US who were born in Mexico has fallen steadily since Mr. Trump's election. However, the claim that Mexico would pay for the wall proved not to be true. By 2021, most construction on the wall has stopped, and only Texas is still working on the wall with further plans to expand it. However, if Donald Trump runs again in 2024, or even a Republican candidate with a similar attitude, things could change. What do you think about the wall to Mexico? Should it be finished, or are there more suitable solutions to control immigration into the US? Number 3. Turkey's crazy plan to build the next Panama Canal. Our next project is in Turkey, where 10 people were imprisoned by the authorities for their criticism of this megaproject. These 10 men were retired admirals who sent a letter of concern about the project. However, the Turkish government viewed this as a betrayal and accused them of using force and violence to get rid of the constitutional order. President Erdogan doesn't take criticism lightly, particularly since his government was almost overthrown by a military coup in 2016. Turkey has a rich history, but the country of Turkey as we know it is only a century old. It gained independence in 1923, and to make its anniversary extra special, Erdogan has set his sights on a number of major megaprojects. The most controversial has been the Istanbul Canal. Istanbul is already home to the Bosphorus Strait, a natural waterway that connects the Black Sea with the European and Asian waters. Western Russia and other Black Sea countries must pass through this strait on all of their shipping journeys to the rest of the world. Approximately 43,000 vessels pass through each year, which is more than the Panama and Suez canals combined. Despite its importance, Turkey doesn't make any money directly from it. This is because of an agreement the country signed in 1936 called the Montreux Convention. The US and Soviet Union agreed to give Turkey control of the Bosphorus Strait, which included having a military presence on the strait. The Turks agreed to give free access to all ships during peacetime. This is with the exception of warships from non-Black Sea countries, which face restrictions when passing through. But this deal that secured Turkey's peace during World War II is now bothering Turkey more and more. Imagine having billions of revenue being made from international trade through your waters, yet you make absolutely no money for it. Then, one day in 2011, Erdogan, who was then prime minister, had an idea. What if we build a canal on the other side of Istanbul? The announcement caused quite a stir. Even Erdogan described the plan as crazy, but crazy in a good way. 10 years later, in 2021, Erdogan is now president and has begun construction on his self-proclaimed crazy project. The canal would be 45 kilometers long, whereas the Suez Canal is 193 kilometers. It will be 17 meters deep and 275 meters wide. Nicholas Pancic, who worked on an extension of the Panama Canal, explained that these canals are all built in the same way. Once the route is planned, you start in the middle and have two teams moving in opposite directions excavating the earth. You essentially create an empty dam until you reach each end, allowing the water to flow right in. The project would be good for two reasons. Firstly, it would reduce traffic along the strait. Secondly, you could charge fees to use the waterway, which would make Turkey a lot of money. The Bosphorus Strait is a difficult waterway to navigate, and only a certain number of ships are allowed on the strait at one time. There are many ships waiting outside to sail onto it, and as we saw when the Suez Canal was blocked in 2021, any disruption to a major shipping route can have a ripple effect on the entire world. Erdogan believes that the new canal will simply pay for itself. The project is expected to take 5 or 6 years to complete and cost $15 billion. Once completed, the canal will generate $1 billion in revenue its first year and increase year by year. So why has the project attracted such criticism, and why were people sent to jail for protesting against it? In April 2021, 10 retired admirals were detained for their criticism of the project, who believed that the project would override the Montreux Convention and destabilize the region. The agreement had successfully stopped warships from entering the Black Sea, but only applied to the Bosphorus Strait. If ships can simply come in through another route, then the whole agreement is meaningless. Without this convention, US warships could sail into the Black Sea and intimidate Russia. Furthermore, a new canal will only work if other countries want to use it. Russia is by far the biggest user of the Bosphorus Strait and could be attacked because of this new canal. Russia might just boycott the canal because it threatens their security. But not only that, President Erdogan will charge a fee for all ships passing through the new canal. The old canal, however, is completely free of charge. Therefore, many shipping companies might choose to accept the waiting time of a few days and use the free route through the Bosphorus. This would make the Istanbul Canal practically useless. And like any megaproject, we need to consider its impact on the environment and the citizens living in that area. Although President Erdogan is excited about the potential financial revenue that the project could bring and believes that his dream project is the most eco-friendly project in the world, many Turkish residents are not thrilled. The canal is being dug in a wooded area where most of the city's fresh water exists, which is now at risk of being contaminated. In addition, the construction of this canal would displace tens of thousands of people, destroy hundreds of thousands of trees, and turn part of Istanbul into an island. Number 2. Qatar's controversial World Cup. Our next project concerns the most watched sporting event on the planet, the World Cup. In July 2009, tension was in the air. All eyes were on Zurich, where it was being decided who would host the 2022 World Cup. Japan and South Korea jointly hosted in 2002, but now wanted to host the event separately. Also eager to host were Australia, who had never done it before. Another key contender was the United States, where soccer was now becoming more and more popular. But the winner was Qatar.
To organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
The country whose population is half the size of Sydney and a quarter of New York. The country that only had one stadium so far that was big enough for a World Cup game. The Qatari population was not known for its interest in football. You can't even play football in Qatar in the summer. It's too hot. The footballing world smelled a rat. Allegations of bribery were leveled at FIFA and its then president, Sepp Blatter. Before the ballot, 2 members of FIFA's committee who cast votes for the World Cup were caught offering votes for cash. Investigations were underway in France and Switzerland, and a US indictment accused 3 FIFA executives of taking payments. However, a FIFA probe cleared Qatar of any wrongdoing. In defense of their selection, the World Cup is a global competition, and it's unfair that a Middle Eastern country has never before been able to host. FIFA's Sepp Blatter said, "The Arabic world deserves a World Cup. They have 22 countries and have not had an opportunity to organize the tournament. So why does Qatar want to host the World Cup? This is mainly because of its desire to move away from oil. The state became wealthy from oil, but it's aware that one day it will all run out. The country needs to make money from other areas, and tourism could help replace the money made from oil. Qatar is a place where Westerners can experience a warm and tropical climate during the cold winter months. The World Cup will open the country to the entire planet, and hopefully, this event will motivate them to return and encourage others to visit too." The biggest controversy for Qatar has been the treatment of its workers. 8 stadiums needed to be built in 12 years, and the country invited workers from much poorer countries to build them. The Guardian alleges that over 6,500 migrant workers have died in Qatar since the country was awarded the contract. To put this into context, 21 people died during preparation for the 2018 World Cup in Russia, and 8 people died during the construction of the Brazil World Cup. The workers in Qatar were also subjected to inhumane conditions, working extremely long hours in extremely hot conditions. The Qataris dispute this figure of 6,500. Nasser Al-Khader, the CEO of the 2022 World Cup, said, "We have consistently gone out to say that these numbers are absolutely false. We do not recognize these numbers. These numbers are not contextual. They're not nuanced enough. This is something that we publish on the website. It's transparent. It's open for everybody to see. 3 workers have died building World Cup stadiums." Nonetheless, the number may even be higher than 6,500. The figures only account for migrants from India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. These numbers did not include workers from the Philippines and Kenya. The Qatar World Cup is expected to go ahead, despite all of these scandals. All 8 stadiums have been completed and are ready to go in November 2022. In March 2021, the Danish, German, and Norwegian football teams wore shirts protesting Qatar's human rights abuses during World Cup qualifying games. Norway has since failed to qualify for the competition, but there is now pressure on the Danish and German teams to refuse to play in the competition. Outside of Germany and the Nordics, the footballing world has been eerily silent. But who knows what might happen in November this year. Number 1. Russia's gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2. Until recently, this next project played a really important role as a response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But let's first go back in time to see how the Nord Stream 2 project was developed, and why this $11.3 billion pipeline will likely never be put in operation. The story begins on the 22nd of November in 2005. It was a historic day for Germany. The country had elected its first ever female chancellor, Angela Merkel. She would rule Germany for another 16 years, but it was a project devised by her opponent in that very election that is putting Germany into hot water today. Merkel's opponent, Gerhard Schröder, was chancellor before his defeat to Merkel. For his election campaign that year, he suggested an offshore pipeline between Russia and Germany. Germany imported a lot of gas from Russia, but this gas had to be transported through other countries, including Ukraine. This meant that both Russia and Germany had to pay a lot of transit fees to those other countries. Schröder's new proposed pipeline would simply run under the Baltic Sea, directly from Russia to Germany. Despite it being her opponent's idea, Merkel ran with it, and construction on the pipeline began. Nord Stream 1 travels from Vyborg, which is near Russia's border with Finland. It then travels down along the Baltic Sea until it reaches Lubmin in northeast Germany. This new pipeline was a huge success, and immediately there were plans to expand the project by adding another pipeline. In 2015, all parties had agreed to build it, and with a budget of $11.3 billion, the construction of Nord Stream 2 was ready to begin. The route of this new pipeline starts in Ust-Luga, near Russia's border with Estonia. Once it enters the Baltic Sea, it eventually meets up with Nord Stream 1 and runs parallel with it, also finishing in Lubmin. But at the time, not everyone was happy about the Nord Stream 2. In 2016, 8 EU governments signed a letter of objection. The letter mentioned the pipeline's potentially destabilizing geopolitical consequences and can pose certain risks for energy security in the region of Central and Eastern Europe. Crucially, Russia had gone to war with Ukraine in 2014, and by then, major tensions between the countries were still brewing. This war between Russia and Ukraine is worrying the US and its European allies. Ukraine has been an important ally for the US since the end of the Cold War, and its independence is strategically important to prevent another Cold War. However, as recent aggressions by Russia increased, the relationships between Russia, Ukraine, and the NATO states worsened. Various calls for de-escalation and diplomacy failed and led to Putin's terrible decision to invade the whole of Ukraine on February 23rd of this year. This is clearly a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty, and an invasion of this scale hasn't been seen in Europe since World War II. Before Putin's invasion of Ukraine, Merkel defended Nord Stream 2 as a purely commercial project and believed that the pipeline in Ukraine could still be used even after Nord Stream 2 is complete. In response to recent events, Merkel's political party condemned Putin's war and expressed that the approval of Nord Stream 2 was clearly a mistake. Today, the pipeline is nearly complete, but Germany's new Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, agreed to finally halt the project as a response and part of Western sanctions. As relationships between the West and Russia have reached their lowest point in decades, it does not look like the $11.3 billion Nord Stream 2 pipeline will ever be used. So, let us know your thoughts on the projects mentioned in this video. Will you be watching the World Cup this year? Are there any other projects we could have highlighted that you think are more controversial? Let us know in the comments down below. If you want to see more about similar projects, you can watch our video about the most useless megaprojects in the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.